Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer tier list video. Today we're back with a synergy tier list for the recently released 10.3 balance patch, which our experts have compiled to help you field strong comps and climb before the season ends next month. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting news to come. The interest form is down below, so feel free to fill that out if you'd like to compete. Be sure to also follow Giant Slayer TV social medias and check out our amazing cast in the description. We're going to start things off at the top with the S tier. In the S tier, we have Warden, Poison Alchemist, Avatar, Crystal, and Ranger. First up, Warden has been atop of the Synergies list for most of Set 2 thanks to their potent CC capability and frontline presence. Although Warden seem to be as popular as ever, they have not been occupying quite as many unit slots on the top of late game comps, largely due to the rise of Poison with Singed in Ranger builds. Regardless of late game trends, you're still running 2 to 4 of them throughout most of the stages of the game for Rangers, and they can see play as transitional units in just about any comp. The duo of Poison Alchemist is exceptionally strong for its tags, and the association made indivisible thanks to Singed acting as the headliner for Poison and one of the strongest units in the game. Singed will enable you to hit the first wave of spells at the start of the fight and stack Morello damage, as well as bleed on the enemy team while ignoring CC and absorbing Zephyrs. Singed and Twitch are the best of friends, and they gladly bring a Mundo or Kog'Maw along for the ride to bring your late game across the finish line. Next up, we have Avatar, which is the strength of Lux as an individual unit tag, and despite her slight damage nerf, she's still been performing very well. The rise of popularity in Crystals brings some counterplay against Lux, but with a decent item set, she can single-handedly win fights. As always, her ability to complete synergies in the late game is not to be underestimated. Continuing along, Crystal remains a premier defensive strategy that is strongly associated with Rangers and Wardens, since Taric and Ashe are the high-cost pair most often used to gain the buff. This combination is what enables Rangers to tank such an impressive amount of damage and do wonders against burst comps such as mages, assassins, and Lux carry. As a splash, Crystal is generally only viable with Lux Taric, though it can be a strong late game pivot for any comp. We close out the S tier with Rangers, and they have moved up from last patch to firmly claim their spot atop of the meta. While the IE nerf has changed itemization priority, the overall strength of having 2 4-cost carries and an impressive balance of support synergies really shines in this patch. Despite the meta having a clear-cut best comp, there is still respectable and healthy representation to be found alongside it. Arriving at the A tier, we find Shadow, Inferno, Mystic, Cloud, Desert, Blademaster, and Predator/Steel. After substantial buffs in 10.2, Shadow was toned down slightly in 10.3 and has taken its place among the healthy and viable A tier comp. Shadow maintains impressive burst damage as well as a strong frontline presence and CC suite in Scion, but lacks additional tank. Thankfully, Shadow is a very flexible composition and commonly looks for Wardens and Inferno units to provide some additional frontline as well as sustained damage. Next, we have the Inferno, which have become closely associated with the Shadow comp and moved up a tier as a result. Inferno has a great range of characters, bringing some tankiness through Amumu and Annie, damage through Kindred, Varus, and Zyra, as well as fairly flexible thanks to the strong core that fits together with Shadow in various combinations. 3 Shadow, 6 Inferno, 6 Shadow, 3 Inferno, 3 Shadow, 3 Inferno, and a splash? The possibilities are endless, which rewards adaptive players greatly. Onward to Mystic, perhaps the best and most useful group of supporting characters in the set. This alliance is all but essential in lobbies with AP-based comps. While we find ourselves in a physical damage heavy meta, it's still important to consider the outliers, the characters and items that can deal heaps of AP damage. There are also still Shadow, Inferno, and Mage comps out there, and the flexibility to include a small 2 or 4 Mystic set at the right time can definitely win you game. Mystic remains steadfast among the top synergies in the late game. Next up, Cloud is a nice little defensive alliance that cleanly fits in the new Yasuo carry comp. Dodge chance is fairly ubiquitous and powerful since every character in the game has attacks to be dodged. However, it is drastically more effective against Ranger and Assassin heavy lobbies that rely almost exclusively on physical attacks for damage, which are the bread and butter of the current meta. Desert remains a powerful synergy because of its small footprint and effectiveness in any lobby. While Desert contributes a reasonable amount of damage even in the lowest armor value scenario, the armor reduction is exceptionally strong against tanky Warden comp comps, which are common in most lobbies. Both Summoner Assassin and Yasuo comps are able to play Desert incredibly easily and can be adapted to counter heavy Warden lobbies very well. Rising from the ashes to A tier, it's BLADEMASTER, which is iterated from Sivir and Friends to Yasuo and Friends. Nerfs to Sivir and nerfs to the tag stuck for a couple of weeks, but a buff to Yasuo's mana bar this patch was all it took for the beloved BLADEMASTERs to come back in a very big way. Though Yasuo is strong, he is not without counterplay, and some clever use of item placement and board hexes can defend against him very well. BLADEMASTERs are quite flexible this time around, and we're excited to see how this comp evolves over the remainder of the set. Our last A tier list alliance is Predator Steel, which are together again with Nocturne being embraced as a frontline tank to complete the set. Predator Steel is one of the most improved comps from this patch from a tier list standpoint. Kog'Maw has been doing very well with his damage buff and still carries Luden's Echo quite well despite the nerf to it. Predator comps generally end up being a variant of Ranger Poison in the late game, though the path to get there has been quite different. It can be a great comp to go after in lobbies where early game Rangers are contested. Just don't sleep on your Ashe, Twitch, Singed pickups late in the game. Belonging to the B tier are Mage, Ocean, Assassin, Summoner, Lunar, Mountain, and Woodland Druid. We begin B tier with the Ocean Mage tag, which are perhaps the most closely associated that they've ever been. The once common Nautilus Thresh frontline splash is often considered too expensive in the mid game for comps that don't plan to keep them, as players race to get their 4 and 5 cost units together ahead of the rest of the lobby, cutting countless corners on the way there. Because of this trend, new Ocean play seems to be at an all-time low. However, the brand carry Ocean Mage comp is still seeing frequent play and putting up decent results as a primary build for these alliances. Our next synergy in B tier is Assassin, which remains a consistent inclusion in several comps as a way to deal with fragile backlines, which are common in the meta. Assassins are rarely considered viable at 6 after the damage nerf and spatula changes this patch, especially since several of the Assassin champions are weak standalone units. Summoner almost exclusively refers to either Summoner Assassin or the Inferno Shadow Splash. The trio of Annie, Yorick, and Azir is still a reasonably powerful one, and paired with the bursty Assassins has carved out a place for some sins among the meta comp. The Lunar synergy rank has waned slightly over time despite receiving an AP buff this patch. Leona remains an extremely cost-effective frontline warden throughout the game, and Karma is integral into buffing carries in Yasuo and Friends, as well as some of the Ranger builds. Despite all of this, the Lunar tag is seeing less play as most comps do not play these units together outside of the ever-shrinking mid-game. Moving on, we have Mountain, which is as strange a synergy to rank as it is to play. Despite its low requirements, it's relatively rare to complete this splash in most games that don't feature Mountain Kiana, since Talia and Malphite are rarely on your radar at the same time. The notable exception is Ocean Mage, which will awkwardly run the pair as a 3rd Warden and 4th Mage on a regular basis. Regardless, the Mountain Shield is exceptionally strong, as are the units that carry the tag. Our final comp in B tier is Woodland Druid, and they have fallen off slightly as the emphasis on cost efficiency and skipping mid-game has taken hold. While Woodland Druid openers are still both strong and common, many players are opting to sacrifice HP for economy by picking up cheap Wardens, Rangers, and Predators, as they act as direct placeholders for their late game units rather than investing in stronger Woodland openers. Contained in the C tier are Glacial, Light, and Berserker. First, we have Glacial, which has moved up slightly to represent its place in Rangers. Ezreal has finally been buffed enough to see play, even if it's just to complete Glacial 2 with the freshly buffed Braum instead of Inferno 3 with Amumu. This is a strong budget play to keep costs down in an incredibly expensive comp, and the Glacial Splash is a powerful tool to have in your playbook in response to contested Amumus, low-income games, and a variety of other scenarios. Sure, it's not a full Glacial comp, but it's a strong representation in a meta's top comp. Next, Light continues on its roller coaster ride of the last few patches. Light has fallen off sharply as a result of the spatula adjustment and Vayne nerf, and it requires commitment to a fairly inflexible build and then hitting a Spat or Lux to close out the game. Light does see play at 3 as a Ranger setup, with Vayne Nasus +1 being a strong tool around level 5 and 6, especially if you roll a lucky Yorick 1 early. We close out the C tier with a tragic tale of decline. Berserker comps have fallen so far over the past few weeks. The meta has shifted steadily from Berserkers over to Rangers, and the Berserker comps have lost ground over time due to their rigid positioning and mobility issues. This is a comp that has also lost a lot of flexibility after the spatula adjustment, making their mobility shortcomings even more apparent without the ability to splash Assassin. And finally, down in the depths of D tier, we have Electric and Soulbound. Electric still has not recovered from its nerfs, and the buffs to Ornn and Zed have not saved it. Electric units are perhaps too distantly spread across the game, and their awkward splash positioning makes the damage hard for Ornn and Volibear to land on key targets. Even in the days of Electric, Lux, and Zed pivot in the late game seem to be over. Our last alliance is Soulbound, which has all but faded away. As Shadow moved away from Soulbound Light builds towards Inferno builds, the overall position of Light has fallen off as well. While the Soulbound synergy is an interesting one, Lucian buffs have not brought him back in favor, and any items that you might commit to a Lucian can be better used by Rangers. That's going to be a wrap for this week's Synergy tier video. It's certainly an interesting and diverse meta with a lot of viable tier 2 comps despite the unquestionable power of Rangers. Do you have any dark horse picks, secret texts from the lab, or thoughts on this unique meta? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the future for more Meta Mondays, Patch Note rundowns, and Tier List Thursdays.